Good morning, good morning. Thank you so much for joining me. This is the podcast, The Endurance of Labor Laws. I'm your lovely host, Lesley Sullivan, and today is episode 203, and we're going to take a look at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. I'm going to try and make this one as short as possible because it is a long one, so I'm going to kind of skip around a little bit in terms of the data, because I don't want to make this a super long episode. But again, we are going to be discussing the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. But first of all, let me give a big shout out to my listeners because as usual, you guys are awesome. We love to see you here online. Do check out our YouTube channel, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. We love to see you guys there as well. And we are uploading more and more videos there for you guys. So here we go. A big shout out to Oklahoma, California, New York, Virginia, Texas, Pennsylvania, British Columbia, Illinois, Oregon, West Virginia, Georgia, Florida, Indiana, New Jersey, Massachusetts, Ohio, Minnesota, Alabama, Nebraska, Washington, Colorado, District of Columbia, also known as DC. Let's see here, Tennessee, Rhode Island, Kansas, North Carolina, Nevada, Mississippi, Maryland, Michigan, Iowa, Alberta, New Brunswick, Louisiana, Wisconsin, Connecticut, Manitoba, Hawaii, Newfoundland, and Labrador. In terms of countries, the United States, Canada, the Russian Federation, the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Australia, Slovakia, South Africa, Japan, Denmark, and Uzbekistan. Good to see all of you. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. Very interesting here. I'm surprised there wasn't a little more data on it, but, you know, it's one of those things, we're covering things kind of in a general sense, not extremely specific. But let's see here. Their common name is Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Their abbreviation is ATF. This bureau was formed July 1st, 1972, but it actually goes back way further than that because its origins start out under a different name and for a different purpose and for a different reason. But, you know, it's very similar here with these different bureaus and agencies. They start out as one thing, and then over time, as our country grows and develops, the name changes because their job responsibilities change over time. You know, like, for example, when there's prohibition and then when there's not prohibition. So there are very much some things in this article and their history that surprised me. Very much so. I just thought it was its own agency always, and it was just completely on its own, and that's not true. So just want to make sure that we have a clear understanding here on some of these things. The preceding agency to this one, it was called IRS, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division. So this was under the arm of the IRS, as creepy as that is. As of 2020, they have way too many employees. And this is going to explain why their budget is just ridiculously high and just overinflated. They have 5,082 employees. That is way too many for this agency. And their annual budget, meaning this is money that they are just given willy-nilly. Like, they don't have to prove anything. They just basically get a nice big check from the Congress. And so I hope and pray that Congress starts calling them out on this stuff because this is ridiculous. So their budget, the monies that they're given, they were given in 2020. This is just 1 year of monies that they're given. They were given $1.4 billion. That is annually. That is ridiculous. And that's not including all the money that they make off of all the guns and firearms, tobacco and alcohol and explosives that they confiscate from people. So you have to realize there's a lot of greed in this agency. It's very unfortunate because what they do is very important. It's just how they go about doing it is very corrupt. It just is. I mean, I'm kind of thinking, you know, is it as bad as the FBI? I don't know. But it's pretty bad. Because these people, they've had some very bad scandals, and for a good reason, because they're doing scandalous things. But also, they've kind of been given a free pass to do whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want, you know, in the name of fighting crime. Well, bull. I mean, these are citizens of the United States that act like they're better than everybody else because they've been given a badge, a gun, and authority. And, you know, you need to be careful who you put into power, first of all. Well, who you elect, who you appoint, and who you hire for these different jobs, because it really does matter. Now, in terms of the jurisdiction for this agency, it is predominantly just the United States because we typically don't tell other countries what to do with their firearms because we don't have jurisdiction over that unless it's something that deals with the United States and a crime has occurred. This is a federal law enforcement agency, so sometimes you get some dirty cops and bad cops in there. They are headquartered in Washington, D.C. They have a big fancy building that we pay for. Their parent agency is the United States Department of Justice, but that's only been since 2003. So before then, they were under the United States Department of the Treasury from 1972 to 2003, basically the IRS. So kind of shocking there that this type of work would be considered part of the IRS, but there's a reason for that. I don't agree with it, but let's take a look at the history here. So it says the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, also known as ATF and sometimes referred to as BATFE, they love abbreviations because they love to feel special, is a domestic law enforcement agency within the United States Department of Justice. Its responsibilities include the investigation and prevention of federal offenses involving the unlawful use, manufacture, and possession of firearms and explosives, acts of arson and bombings, and illegal trafficking and tax evasion of alcohol and tobacco products. Hence, the IRS gets involved in this pretty quick because the IRS loves money as well. The ATF also regulates via licensing the sale, possession, and transportation of firearms, ammunition, and explosives in interstate commerce. That's why we need to be careful about our interstate commerce laws because you don't want the federal government basically controlling your state because we have states' rights. Like we are one nation under God, but that also includes the fact that we are multiple states made up of one country. So we need to be aware of that. It says many of the ATF's activities are carried out in conjunction with task forces made up of state and local law enforcement officers, such as Project Safe Neighborhoods. I guess this is a project that helps keep neighborhoods safe, and they try and prevent the youth basically from getting into gangs and things of that nature. And they're trying to get guns off the street and help young people not be in gangs and that kind of thing. So they're trying to protect neighborhoods. Again, we talked about how many employees they have, and then their budget is just ridiculous. A little bit of history here. It says the ATF was formerly part of the United States Department of the Treasury, having been formed in 1886 as the Revenue Laboratory within the Treasury Department's Bureau of Internal Revenue. The history of ATF can be subsequently traced to the time of the revenuers, however you pronounce that word, and the Bureau of Prohibition. So this goes back to people being against alcohol and punishing citizens for wanting, a glass of vodka. So basically punish people for trying to have any kind of fun whatsoever. Let's see here. And the Bureau of Prohibition, which was formed as a unit of the Bureau of Internal Revenue in 1920. So what's really sad is that whenever the federal government wants to really punish people, but they don't want to have to hire a police force, they go to the IRS to do their dirty work. That is exactly what Obama did with Obamacare. He gave the policing aspect of that law, he put it in the hands of the IRS. What else is new? That is not the IRS's job. The IRS already has a problem with their own ego, and with bothering and harassing citizens. So why would you enable them to have more power, the IRS? It's just ridiculous because the more power you give to these federal agencies, the less power and rights the American people have, or the less likely the rights of the American people are protected by constitutional law, which is very sad because you would think that since our rights are protected by the Constitution, you would think that agencies and other agencies like this would not have so much power. But this is what happens when you get bad people in office and they institute powerful bureaucracies to determine what is considered normal behavior for a government. So that's really disturbing there. That's why you have to be careful who you elect to office, because who they appoint, it really determines the trajectory of your country and sometimes the lawlessness that can happen. So let's see here. It was made an independent agency within the Treasury Department in 1927, was transferred to the Justice Department in 1930, and became briefly a division of the FBI in 1933. Why am I not surprised? Let's see here. When the Volstead Act, and I'm not familiar with that act, we'll circle back to it at a later time and discuss it. When the Volstead Act, which established prohibition in the United States, was repealed in December 1933, thank goodness, the unit was transferred from the Department of Justice back to the Department of the Treasury. So now they're going to make even more money, right? So this is a perfect example where the federal government is a big fat glutton and loves your money. So this is why the power is with the people, not with the government, because we, the people, are the government. So people need to wake up to that. Let's see here. The unit was transferred from the Department of Justice back to the Department of the Treasury, where it became the Alcohol Tax Unit. So the government wants more money, right? Alcohol Tax Unit, also known as ATU, of the Bureau of Internal Revenue. The Bureau of Internal Revenue. So basically, you basically have a government that's just moving a department back and forth, but regardless of where that department lands and regardless of whose jurisdiction it is under, they want your money. So they don't really care that you don't become an alcoholic. They don't really care, that to prevent you getting lung cancer, they want the tax dollars off of all that. An example of that is the taxes that are on cigarettes. So basically, what government does, at least the United States, is they basically find a way to legalize quote-unquote vices, but the only reason why they legalize a vice is so they can tax it. So, don't expect your government to really care about you because they don't. So that's why you need to wake up to the fact that you have rights as a citizen, not as like a government. Because we, the citizens, are the government, and that's why you have voting rights, and you need to participate in voting if you have that right. And I say if you have that right because there are so many people in the United States right now, they do not have the right to vote, but yet they're trying to get the right to vote in a very unlawful and illegal manner. And here's the thing, you break the law, you're doing just that. You're breaking the law. It's not right. So I would greatly appreciate if more people respected the United States and the law and the laws of the land. Because it would be like me moving to Mexico, not being a citizen, and then trying to vote in every election that they have and try and control like a community or something. Sorry, that just doesn't work in Mexico. First of all, good luck surviving there with the drug cartels going on and whatnot. But that's what some people do when they immigrate here to the United States. They think that they should call the shots. I don't think so. You weren't born here. You're not from here. And if you're not legally here, you don't have a say. That's not being hateful or being rude. It's just saying it like it is. It's no different than if you went to Russia illegally and then you're trying to vote in their elections. Good luck with that with Putin and his goons. So, just count your blessings, people. My goodness. Moving on here, it says, in the early 1950s, the Bureau of Internal Revenue was renamed Internal Revenue Service, which it's not a service to the United States at all. And the ATU was given the additional responsibility of enforcing federal tobacco tax laws. Excuse me. Let me get a drink of water. The air is so dry here. Oh man, the temperature dropped last night here in Oklahoma, and it is nippy. Okay. So they were given additional responsibility of enforcing federal tobacco tax laws. Basically, give us your money, we'll shake you down, for smoking a cigarette. At this time, the name of the ATU was changed to the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax Division. Hence, they at least they're saying it like it is. They want your money. They're not hiding the fact that they're going after the change in your pocket. At least they're being blunt about it, right? So, in 1968, with the passage of the Gun Control Act, and I don't know what that is, we will take a look at that in a later podcast, the agency changed its name again, this time to the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms Division of the IRS, and first began to be referred to by its initials, ATF. In Title 11 of the Organized Crime Control Act of 1970, and we will talk about that later, Congress enacted the Explosives Control Act. We'll talk about that one later. which provide for close regulation of the explosives industry and designates certain arsons and bombings as federal crimes. The Secretary of the Treasury was made responsible for administering the regulatory aspects of the new law, which is stupid. That just doesn't make any sense. And was given jurisdiction over criminal violations relating to the regulatory controls. These responsibilities were delegated to the ATF division of the IRS. The Secretary and the Attorney General were given concurrent jurisdiction over arson and bombing offenses. So why the IRS is being put in charge of some of this stuff is just weird. It's just weird. So this is a perfect example of where federal government gets it wrong, but they're still going to tax you. Regardless of how stupid their departments are being run, they're still going to shake you down for your change and the money that's in your pockets. So be aware of that. Goes on to say in 1972, ATF was officially established as an independent bureau within the Treasury Department on July 1st, 1972. This transferred the responsibilities of the ATF division of the IRS to the new Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Let's see here, and moving on forward, it says, in the wake of the terrorist attack on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon on September 11th, 2001, President George W. Bush signed into law the Homeland Security Act of 2002. I don't agree with that at all. Homeland Security has been hell for citizens, not for terrorists. In addition to the creation of the Department of Homeland Security, not a big fan of them either because of what they do. That is, how do I describe this? That goes against Americans. You know, it's like when you go to the airport, you have these TSA agents. They're horrible to American citizens, but they're not really going after terrorists. You know, they're not known as being nice people. So it's like, why would you sign into something? And this was a Republican president, mind you. Why would you sign something into law that punishes Americans for something that was not, committed by an American? It just makes no sense to me. It's bizarre. But anyway, the law shifted ATF from the Department of the Treasury to the Department of Justice. I actually agree with that. Because the IRS, they're not the ones that should be, they should not have law enforcement like this. Because it doesn't really have anything to do with taxes. And it's not dealing with income per se. There's a difference between white collar crimes and blue collar crimes. And I think putting this type of bureau within the IRS division, I think it's a conflict of interest. And I don't think the IRS really knows how to fight criminals like that. That's just not their training. It does need to be under the Department of Justice because that's more along the lines of military, police, and things of that nature. That I actually agree with because that actually makes sense, really. So going on, it says the agency's name was changed to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. However, the agency still was referred to as the ATF, of course. Additionally, they have the task of collection of federal tax revenue derived from the production of tobacco and alcohol products and the regulatory function related to protecting the public in issues related to the production of alcohol previously handled by the Bureau of Internal Revenue as well as by ATF, and this was transferred to the newly established department. Let's see here. Now we're going to talk about activities from 1972 to the year 2000. Or to the year 2000. There were complaints against the ATF, and these were valid. It was really sad. See, because here's the thing. The ATF is not known for being legal, moral, and ethical. They never really have been. And that's a big problem. And I think one of the biggest reasons why they've had a problem with those issues is because they were predominantly within the IRS. And the IRS is not known for its ethics or its morals. I think the Department of Justice is a lot better at that. I don't think they're perfect, not by any means. But the IRS, they're known for being weasels, and they're known for being really hard on Americans and being, they're just known for being weasels and jerks. The Department of Justice, they're not known for that. And like I said, they're not perfect, but I think whenever you have an agency that is founded or formed or put in the control of the IRS, you can definitely expect a lot of problems because the IRS is not known for being ethical whatsoever. So I think that's where a lot of this stems from. It's not an excuse. It's just something that I have noticed over the years. So it says complaints regarding the techniques used by ATF and their effort to generate firearm cases led to hearings before congressional committees in the late 1970s and 1980s. At these hearings, evidence was received from citizens who had been charged by the ATF, from experts who had studied the ATF, and from officials of the Bureau itself. A Senate subcommittee report stated, based upon these hearings, it is apparent that ATF enforcement tactics made possible by current federal firearms laws are constitutionally, legally, and practically reprehensible. That says a lot right there. So, no doubt it was a scandal. It says evidence received demonstrated that ATF agents tended to concentrate upon collector's items rather than criminal street drugs. Here's the thing, greed, they have a problem there. They love money, just like the IRS. In hearings before ATF's Appropriations Subcommittee, however, testimony was submitted estimating that 75% of ATF gun prosecutions were aimed at ordinary citizens with no criminal intent. Why am I not surprised? See, this is what is called bad cops. This is also called policing. There's a time and place for police officers of any, I'd say, agency. There's a time and place for them to properly conduct investigations, but then when they're just targeting ordinary citizens, that's a problem. Because what's interesting is that ordinary citizens are a way easier target, and they are way easier to shake down by law enforcement than the bad guys. So it's like, okay, why do we have an agency that's making it a point to not do its job, not do it well, and they're shaking down the wrong people, like they are doing bad things to just regular everyday citizens and making their life a living hell? Here's the thing, we the American people authorized that. And you're probably thinking, no we didn't. Yes we did. We did that by who we elected to office, and then who we allowed them to appoint to positions of power. And, we allowed this stuff to continue to happen because sometimes we just think that owning a gun means you can do whatever you want, especially if you have a badge. And that's not true. Regardless of whether you own a gun because you are a police officer or a special agent or maybe you're just a regular everyday citizen, owning a gun is a serious responsibility. It just is. And so what's really shocking to me is that a lot of these federal agencies that have any type of law enforcement, I would say, area to them, they tend to have some bad cops in there. And see, here's the thing, bad cops tend to promote and hire other bad cops. It's no different than bad cops in a city or a town. It's the good old boy system. Well, if you don't stop the good old boy system, and if you're not taking ownership of these, I would say of these situations that are continuing to happen sometimes, then that's the American people's fault. I mean, we are not as corrupt as like Jamaica or Haiti or South Africa or Russia, but I mean, we could do a whole lot better. We definitely do have the right to bear arms, and that should never be taken away from us. I'm just saying that, when you own a gun, it's no different than owning a car. You are responsible for your private property, and you have to know what you're doing with whatever you have bought, right? And you have to take ownership of that. And you are responsible for it. So it's not one of those things where it's, I saw a video a long time ago where there are these stupid guys, they just go out in the country and they just start shooting at cans and trees, and I'm just like, do you realize, first of all, you're wasting ammunition? And number two, you could actually hurt somebody. Like if you want to fire your gun, fine, but go to a firing range or go hunting. Just make sure it's legal. But there's some people, they think that when they own a gun, oh wow, I'm free to do anything I want. No, you're not. You still have to abide by the rules, laws, and regulations of this country. That's just how it is. I wish more people realized that, and sometimes cops are just as bad, if not worse about that, than regular everyday citizens. So, because usually everyday citizens, just ordinary citizens, usually they are not the ones who are gun happy, just like crazy gun kind of thing. It's usually dirty cops that are like that. So just be aware of that. So needless to say, because ordinary citizens were being harassed, It says the Firearm Owners Protection Act of 1986 addressed some of the abuses noted in the 1982 Senate Judiciary Subcommittee report. Thank goodness, right? This next one is really sad. It's the Ruby Ridge siege controversy. Wow, this one kind of shocked me a little bit. It says the Ruby Ridge siege began in June 1990. Randy Weaver sold 2 unregistered short-barrel shotguns to Kenneth Fadley, a ATF informant. So basically, that's entrapment. Like, I don't agree with these agents, whether they're ATF or police. Like, I don't like this undercover stuff like this because you're entrapping a citizen. And see, entrapment is illegal. And also, it's immoral. Like, it goes against God's law. Like, you're not supposed to entrap somebody. That's wrong. But that is exactly what our government gives itself permission to do. So this guy, unfortunately, Kenneth, or not him, he's the jerk. Randy Weaver, he got entrapped by the ATF. Okay? This transaction was recorded and presented to the court. So, of course, the court is more than likely, if they can be bought and sold, they're going to side with the ATF. So, who knows about all that. Weaver refused to face his accusers, that's a mistake, and became a fugitive from justice. He was probably very scared. He maintained the barrels were a legal length, but after Fadley took possession, the shotguns were later found to be shorter than allowed by federal law, requiring registration as a short-barreled shotgun and a payment of a $200 tax. You know, how do we know that informant, didn't saw off part of the firearm or something? You know what I mean? And stuff, here's another thing, maybe this guy didn't realize what he had. There's all these different scenarios, but here's the thing, you have an informant that is setting someone up for failure and entrapping them. And, I'm more inclined to believe the citizen because they're being entrapped. And it's not right to be entrapped. And let me get a drink of water because my voice is going out. Hold on just a moment. So anyway, it says, ATF filed firearms charges against Weaver, but offered to drop the charges if he became an informant. So if you do what we want, we won't send you to jail. So why don't you do what we want so you don't go to jail? Wow. Evil. Evil. After Weaver refused to cooperate, ATF passed on false information about Weaver to other agencies that became part of a misleading file that profiled Weaver as having explosive booby traps, tunnels, and bunkers at his home, growing marijuana, having felony convictions, and being a bank robber. Wow, lay it on thick, ATF. Lay it on thick. See, that's what's called dirty cops, right there. Let's just, add everything that you can possibly add to make this person look horrible. I mean, it's just ridiculous what this agency did. It's shocking. At his later trial, the gun charges were determined to be entrapment, thank goodness, and Weaver was acquitted. However, Weaver missed a February 20th, 1991 court date because U.S. probation officer Richens mistakenly told Weaver that the trial date was March 20th, and the U.S. Marshals USMS was charged with bringing Weaver in. So now he's considered a fugitive again because that probation officer, I guarantee you, he purposely lied to him. You can't trust probation officers. They're liars. Weaver remained with his family in their mountaintop cabin. On August 21st, 1992, a USMS surveillance team encountered Weaver, a friend, and family members on a trail near the cabin, resulting in a shootout that killed U.S. Marshal Bill DeGan, Weaver's son Samuel, and Weaver's pet dog. Wow. So is this the wild, wild west? My goodness. Lack of ethics here, my goodness, by this agency. FBI hostage rescue team members surrounded the cabin. That had to terrify the family. My goodness, these people are being harassed. They're being harassed. The next day, the hostage rescue team sniper, Horichi, fired at Weaver, missing and killing Weaver's wife. So these people have now killed his son, the dog, and his wife. Wow. A subsequent Department of Justice review in a congressional hearing raised several questions about the actions of ATF, USMS, USAO, and FBI HRT and the mishandling of intelligence at the USMS and FBI headquarters. Wow, several questions, huh? How about those people are fired? They took human lives. I mean, they acted like they're going after, Saddam Hussein. These were U.S. citizens that did nothing wrong, people. This is sad. This is sad. It says the Ruby Ridge incident has become a lightning rod for legal activists within the gun rights community. Wow. Why am I not surprised? Why am I not surprised? I mean, how would you like it if you lost your son and your spouse and your dog? I think that makes it even worse. Although animal life is not equivalent to human life, I'm just saying, basically anything could be a target for the ATF and the FBI. It's just what are regular everyday citizens supposed to do when they're not trained like these federal agencies and they're being attacked? They're being attacked. They're not military people, and it's just, they're not in a federal agency. They have not had the same training, if any training at all. And, this agency blatantly lied about this guy, probably lied about his family, and then they shoot his son and his wife. I mean, wow. Really sick. Moving on. Let's see here. I guess what happened this is kind of funky. It says between May 2004 and August 2005, ATF agents in conjunction with Virginia State, County, and City Police, so they're getting all the guys together, right? All law enforcement, all boots on the ground, conducted an operation at 8 gun shows in the Richmond area to reduce straw purchases for criminals. I'm not familiar with straw purchases, so I'll have to look that up. In a February 2006 House subcommittee hearing, the show's owner said, quote, people were approached and discouraged from purchasing guns. Before attempting to purchase, they were interrogated and accused of being in the business without a license, detained in police vehicles, and gun buyers' homes were visited by police and much more. Wow. That's called policing, folks. And you have the right to bear arms. And this is what the police and these people think they have the right to do along with the ATF. So if you think these people are pro-Americans that work for these agencies and these federal agencies and state agencies, if you think they are for the American public, oh my goodness, you are so wrong. These people, they think their labor and what they do is more important than everybody else's job, so then they give themselves permission to break the law or to push it as far as they can. That's not right. And a lot of these people that work as ATF agents or police officers or enforcement, that kind of thing, a lot of these are unionized jobs. A lot of them. So this is why they have, or one reason why they have this sense of entitlement. And they think they have the right to tell other Americans what to do, outside their home and inside their home. They do not have the right to do that whatsoever. It says here, a gun salesman testified that he was singled out for harassment by 2 ATF agents. The owner of a gun shop testified that he thought agents questioned female customers too often. He said that times had changed and more women were shopping for guns, adding, quote, it seems, however, to be the prevailing opinion for law enforcement at the gun show that any woman who brings a male friend for advice or support must be making a straw purchase. End quote. A private investigator said the NRA contracted her to go to Richmond to investigate dozens of complaints by NRA members of, quote, massive law enforcement presence, resident checks, and minority buyers being followed, pulled over, and their legally purchased guns seized. Wow. Policing, folks. Policing. The purchasers were compelled by an ATF letter to appear at ATF offices to explain and justify their purchases. ATF stated that this was a pilot program, that ATF was planning to apply throughout the country. Hopefully never, because it's ridiculous. In Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, ATF agents visited a gun show's customers' homes a week after the show, demanding to see the buyer's guns or sale paperwork and arresting those who could not or would not comply. Wow. The ATF has done it again. This is ridiculous. So we have the right to bear arms, but yet this agency thinks that only they should have guns. Gee, communist China does that. Terrorists think that way. Dictators think that way. I mean, really, like, this is how these people behave. Notice they're not going to criminals' homes. They're not actually fighting crime. They're harassing and bothering just ordinary, everyday citizens of the United States. That is a huge problem, folks. This agency should have their budget cut in half at least. Because think about it, that would still be $500 million. These people are overpaid, just harassing agents. They're not special agents, they are harassing agents. Maybe if they had lack of funding, maybe they would straighten up. But see, here's the thing. They go to Congress and get all the money they want. And here's the thing, that's our money. It's our tax dollars. It's not just their tax dollars. I mean, hopefully they do pay taxes. But, here's the thing. They just think that their agency can just write out any kind of check for any kind of amount. And that we, the people, should help them cash it and just hand over the money. I don't even think so. I am not against this agency, not by any means. I'm not against law enforcement. I'm actually all for them. It's just, it needs to be run correctly. And they're not going after bad people. They're going after good people. That is policing. That is harassment. That is harassment. So it's no wonder that agencies like this, just like the Department of Defense, they think they can get away with anything and everything, because basically they can. Well, who enables them? Our federal government. The people who we elect to office when they don't do what's right. So please wake up to this, that, agencies like this, they do have their place, but they need to be put in their place. And let me tell you, I guarantee you, whenever someone finally steps up to the plate and says, we are putting you in your place, I guarantee you, there's going to be so much squealing because these people are pigs. They've been feeding at the trough of the American taxpayer for years, decades, and no one calls them out on it. Well, let me take that back. The only people that do call them out are their victims. And that's if they have the courage to call them out. And to say it publicly at a Senate hearing. It takes courage to do that, folks. It takes courage, and God bless those citizens. They went through hell because of the ATF. Let's see here. It says, a September 2008 report by the Justice Department's Office of the Inspector General determined that 76 firearms and 418 laptop computers were lost, stolen, or missing, wink wink, from ATF after a 59-month audit between 2002 and 2007. How much do you want to bet there was way more that was quote-unquote lost, stolen, or missing? I bet you there's way more, because there is so much money to be made in firearms. You can't tell me the ATF isn't doing stuff wrong. You just can't tell me they're not. Oh, man. Now, let's see here. So, there is a little bit of controversy about whenever they have a director. It's been very difficult for them to get a director to be confirmed because it's almost like it's the good old boy system. So it's like you don't want someone that's a nut that is completely against firearms, but you also don't want someone that's thinks like some crazy stupid hick that doesn't understand that we do have gun laws. They shouldn't be extreme, but we do have gun laws. And you can't be in the back pocket of the NRA. You need someone that's in the middle, that cannot be bought or sold. And I'm not against the NRA, the National Rifle Association. I think that they do a lot of good, but I'm saying that we have to be careful who we put into a position of power or who we allow to be appointed to these positions of power, because we want to make sure that there's not favoritism. Because, favoritism leads to problems regardless of which side of the aisle you are on. So we need to be careful about that. So they've had some problems with being able to find someone that actually doesn't have a conflict of interest kind of thing. In terms of their training, these special agents or whatever, They go through a 2-part training program, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about that. They go through a criminal investigator training program, but I think it's kind of stupid, because they go through a criminal investigator training program, they go through that, and then they go through a special agent basic training program, but yet they're still harassing Americans. They're still harassing regular everyday people, like they're not actually catching criminals, like they're not doing their job. So it's like, okay, what's the point of us hiring people to go through these training programs? And mind you, we pay for their training. We're paying their salary, we're paying their health insurance, life insurance, 401k, their benefits, we're paying for this training program. What's the point of paying for all this if they're not actually going to use it to do the job that we're paying them to do? You know, it's just kind of like, okay, here we go. More people just, collecting a paycheck but not doing their job. That is typical for federal bureaucracies to do that. So just FYI, be aware of that. Let me get a drink of water. Hold on just one moment. Okay, so talking a little bit about their organization. They do have 2 directors. They have an chief of staff, and then chief of counsel. Then they have a deputy director, and that is the chief operating officer. And what I've noticed with these chief operating officers, it's just really musical chairs, because typically when people get appointed to these different positions, it's one of these things where they've already been involved in this agency and they just kind of move people around like musical chairs, but it's really not getting the best and the brightest. So it's definitely like a used car dealership where, if you've gotten screwed over by one car salesman, then you've gotten screwed over by all of them because they're virtually all the same. So that's what I've noticed with their higher ups. They just rotate musical chairs, and that's how they really nominate each other and promote each other and things of that nature. And it's not really as ethical, and they're not giving us their best and brightest because it's still a bureaucracy. And so it's just the good old boy system strikes again. So I hope and pray that they work on that, because I think that when you don't get new blood in there, then you're going to continue to have the same problems that you've always had. But see, here's the thing, when you do get new blood in there, so to speak, they're going to ruffle some feathers, and that's exactly what should be done. Because, what's interesting is that, people that like the status quo, they hate change. Because then they know their position of power is threatened for whatever reason. So that's why a lot of these people, they just play musical chairs, so that way, okay, you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. That has been happening in our federal government for decades, and it has no purpose in this country. It shouldn't be happening, because that's not the American way. So under the deputy director, the chief operating officer, you have the Office of Field Operations, you have the Office of Human Resources and Professional Development, you have Office of Management, Office of Enforcement Programs and Services. Who knows what that really means? Because supposedly they're being trained, but they're still targeting Americans. So it's like, okay, you're not really going after the bad guys, right? Then there's the Office of Professional Responsibility and Security Operations. We've talked about those in times past. They also have an Office of Public and Governmental Affairs. They have an Office of Science and Technology, and then they have an Office of Strategic Intelligence and Information. Obviously, they failed at that tremendously, especially with that Weaver guy. And they didn't care that they were lying about a U.S. citizen. They didn't care. Like, it was easier to go after him than somebody way worse. So that's where this stuff gets hurtful, and it disappoints the American people, because it's like, okay, the American people, the majority of the citizens here in the United States are good, kind people. They're loyal, they're faithful. Most people here in the United States are Christian. And so I think it's really sad when you have people in a federal agency that target people that, they're not prepared to be targeted. They're just not, because they love their country and they're not the problem. So it's kind of like, what are they going to do kind of thing. Now, this agency does have field divisions. They have several of them across the United States in major cities. And the major cities are Atlanta, Georgia, Baltimore, Maryland, Boston, Massachusetts, Charlotte, North Carolina, Chicago, Illinois. That's a cesspool and a rat hole. Chicago has been corrupt for a long time. That's nothing new. Columbus, Ohio, Dallas, Texas, very liberal, considering that supposedly in a Christian state. yeah, that's bull. There are so many abortions that are done or that have been done. I don't know if they still do a whole bunch of them in Texas, but I mean, these abortion clinics, they're in college towns. They're not in these mom and pop towns or whatever. They're in college towns where people, where kids go to lose their virginity basically, which is stupid because you should actually strive to preserve your purity and your chastity and your integrity, but, that's just not how the United States is right now, unfortunately. But, if you want to, throw away your chastity and your charity, by all means, our young people already do that. They go to college and they're proud of it. And it's like, wow, that's not something to be proud of. It doesn't make you a man. It doesn't make you a woman. It makes you a skank is what it makes you. Another field office is Denver, Colorado, Detroit, Michigan. The sad thing about Detroit, Michigan is that that's one of the places where there is a really large car factoring industry up there. I don't know if they still have a plant up there or not, because a lot of plants have moved to, I think it's Mexico and Vietnam or something. And so a lot of Americans have lost jobs, but there were several car industry manufacturers up there in Michigan and Detroit. And Detroit has been a cesspool for a long time because, a lot of their labor was controlled by labor unions, and it probably still is. And so they just sucked it dry of the money. And, these labor unions, they don't understand supply and demand. They don't understand currency. They don't understand inflation. And because of that, they ruined Detroit, Michigan. They caused the auto industry to suffer several times, but yet they got a bailout, I think like 2 or 3 of them from the federal government. Basically, our tax dollars went to these jerks, that were just overspending their own money and didn't care that they hurt the American people and basically stole our money, stole our tax dollars, and then don't even have the guts or the integrity to pay that money back to the American people. I don't know if they have paid any of it back, but we should not be bailing out companies like this. This too big to fail line, that's bull. No one is too big to fail. No one. And the American taxpayer is not responsible for someone else's failures. Like, we are not someone else's personal piggy bank. But that is exactly what happened in Detroit, Michigan. It's very disturbing. Also, unfortunately, in Michigan, they've got a nut up there. There's a woman, I think she's still their governor. She looks like Cruella de Vil. Her really dark hair and her red lips. She's a nut. She was a nut during COVID-19. And she just doesn't understand how the economy works. But then again, she's Democrat. Another thing, unfortunate with Michigan, is they have a large Muslim population up there. And I'm not against Muslims. Not by any means, because I've met some really kind Muslims over the years, but the Muslims that are up there, they have done everything they can to take over different cities and towns and make it so that city councils and things like that are predominantly Muslim, and a lot of them want Sharia law. Well, Sharia law is a horrible law that is very oppressive and deplorable to women and children. So isn't it interesting that Muslims come over here to have a better life, to escape the very law that was hurting them and their families. But then when they get over here, they want to implement the very thing that was hurting and harming them. Makes no sense to me. So that's why I don't vote for Muslims. I mean, the risk is too great. I mean, they can love America, they can make a lot of money here, but when it comes to religion, you cannot separate them from their faith. You just cannot. And the Muslim religion is really a cult. And the way that you know that it is a cult is because of how it treats women and children. Like in Sharia law, they have mercy killings. Did you know that they only do mercy killings on women? They don't do that to men. They don't. Like, a man can sleep around outside of wedlock, but a woman, that's the death sentence for her. See, under Sharia law, a woman can be beaten to death and basically be executed, just like how a serial killer would receive a execution. See, that's called a theocracy. That's why in this country we have separation of church and state. I mean, I am a born-again Christian believer, but I have noticed that within Christianity, whenever you get extremely religious, it actually is not, when somebody gets extremely religious within Christianity, to me, they are not a man or a woman after God's own heart. Because God is not for hurting or harming people. But cults are. So that's why we have to, just be aware of that and understand that under Sharia law, there is no separation of church and state. There is no separation of church and state under that. That's why it's called a theocracy. That's why a lot of these mullahs or whatever over in the Middle East, that's why they have so much control over so many people. It's because they suppress, oppress, and they are horrible to women. Horrible. Like, they stone their women to death over there. It's brutal. And it's just like, whoa. I mean, just unbelievable. So I just find it really odd that we have allowed different religions to basically take place here in the United States that actually violate our laws and they actually endanger human life. We do have the right to practice whatever religion we want, but here's the thing. Your right to practice your religion stop basically at the end of your nose. Basically, like you can't interfere with me practicing my faith. And you can't endanger my life or someone else's life just because of your religion or your cult or your sect, whatever the case may be. But with Sharia law and these very extreme, kind of, I guess, theocracies and these very religious people that are just so extreme, you have to be careful with that kind of thinking because there is no freedom in that. God promises us freedom in the Bible. And what's interesting is that whenever mankind says, oh, we understand it, we understand freedom and we're going to be religious. Guess what? You just became a Pharisee or a Sadducee and you just hindered freedom for everybody. See, there's some people, they think that based on their religion, that they have the right to hinder someone else's rights. And that's not what God says at all, and that's not what our Constitution says at all. So I wish that more Christians would wake up to this. Because I meet a lot of Christians that don't act like they're Christian. I think that if the Christian church behaved better, we would have a way better country. And we would get back to our roots and get back to our founding. Because, what's interesting is that when our founding fathers founded the United States of America, there were already several different types of religions being practiced here in the United States, but they did not harm other people. So, there's not a problem necessarily with these different denominations within Christianity. It's the individual people and how they think. And how they give themselves permission to do whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want, and that's not right. That's lawlessness. And God, our Heavenly Father, is not for lawlessness. God is very clear, hey, obey my law. And also, wherever you live, you need to obey the laws of the land as long as those laws do not violate my laws. See, that's the one true faith. And that's the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. Hopefully, more people, especially Christians, can wake up to that. Another field office for ATF is Houston, Texas. Oh, let's see here. Next one is Kansas City, Missouri, Los Angeles, California. You know what's really sad about Los Angeles, California? They have such a huge homeless population, and it's just declining their city. And what's interesting is that, Los Angeles, that's Spanish for the angels. So it's heavenly, right? But Los Angeles, California is very liberal, it's very progressive, and it's very Democrat. So they're not very religious. They believe in gay marriage. They completely support, or a lot of them support, I shouldn't say completely, because I don't know every single citizen in Los Angeles, California, but there's just this common mindset out there that the LGBTQ community, it's like they're untouchable and they can do whatever they want. I don't even think so. The LGBTQ community is a very dangerous community. And I don't mean in terms of violence, I mean in their own theology. Because they want anybody and everybody to just completely accept what they think, say, and do as legit and true, and it's not. The LGBTQ community has a lot of problems in mental health as well as within their sexuality. So being that they have a lot of issues, especially in those two realms that are very important and they need help with those things for sure, we should not be caving in to their agenda. We should be believing in the United States. But whenever you cave into people that are abnormal and don't understand biology or anatomy, and they don't understand that when a minor is a minor, you can't be having sex with minors. When they don't understand that, that means we've got a big problem. And that is a big problem within the LGBTQ community, whatever alphabet they want to use. It's a problem with them because that community, especially homosexual men, they want to lower the age of consent so that way they can have sex with minors and not go to jail and be prosecuted and be labeled a pedophile. And they don't want to be on the registered sex offenders list, but they should be. Because I think if you're wanting to have sex with a minor, whether you're gay, straight, or sexually confused, you've got a big problem. Big problem. In our society, we have a responsibility to protect minors. As adults, anyone over the age of 18 is an adult. So that means that anyone over the age of 18 has a civic responsibility. There's also a Christian responsibility to protect the young, to protect the vulnerable, especially from, I would say, sexually promiscuous people and from disturbed adults that are very sexually driven. We are supposed to protect our children from things like that. But, the LGBTQ community, they just want everybody to think that what they think, say, and do is normal, it's okay, and they should never be held accountable. I don't think so. What's interesting is that if we had a bunch of straight guys that are like in their 40s or 50s, like these fat pig slobs, let's say you have a bunch of men that look like that, if they came out of the woods, basically, I'm not saying they all live in the woods, but I'm just saying, like, if they came out of the woodwork and said, oh, we should legally be able to have sex with your 12-year-old daughters, what do you think would be the response of this country? But yet, look at what the LGBTQ community wants to do, especially homosexual men. Men, not boys, homosexual men. They want your children, not the girls. They want the boys. And if you want an example of this, look to the Catholic Church. I mean, if it's wrong for a priest to be a pedophile and to sodomize a child, then it's wrong for the LGBTQ community to do that to children. But what's weird is that Los Angeles, California, the Angels, okay, they don't see anything wrong with what that community thinks, says, or does, and they have parades for them, they have all these .orgs, they have all these foundations. I mean, it's just like, why are we not protecting minors? I don't understand that. I just don't get it. Like, it used to be considered deviant behavior for any adult to target children. And see, here's what, I've said this before, here's what people don't realize, is that if you cave into what the LGBTQ community wants to do and they want to legalize their sexual activity, especially with minors, then how are the police ever going to be able to investigate, arrest, and then how are prosecutors supposed to ever be able to take someone to court, criminal court, and prosecute them for a crime that was committed when the crime, when you legalize it? I mean, that's the thing. Like, don't bind law enforcement's hands on stuff like this. You have to be careful in what you believe in and what you vote for. And what's really sad is a lot of liberals and progressives, like, the nuttier they are, the more they hate the police. Like, I don't hate anybody. I dislike bad cops and dirty cops, but bad cops and dirty cops are few and far between because the majority of law enforcement, they're usually pretty good people. I mean, normally. But here's the thing. If you make certain sexual acts legal that should not be legal, and then they start to happen, I mean, and then you get rid of your police force, like what's happened on the West Coast a little bit, like in Seattle and some other places, you're going down a path of lawlessness, and that's not right. It's not right. So Los Angeles, the name of your city is the Angels. I think you need to start acting more Christian. And I don't mean Bible thumper crazy Christian, because I can't stand that. But I think you need to start having more morals and values and just, really focus on what God wants you to do. Because we know that, the further away we get from God, the worse our country gets. Because we are one nation under God. We are not one nation under homosexuals. We are not one nation under LGBTQ community. We are one nation under God. See, what a lot of people don't realize is that whatever you worship becomes what you praise. And whatever you worship becomes your God. It doesn't matter whether it's, your politics or your sexuality or an agenda, or maybe, you go to the mall too much or things like that, or maybe you spend too much time on social media. Whatever you predominantly give your attention to, basically that's what you're worshiping. And here's the thing. You should only be worshiping God. No one else. Because whenever people start worshiping something else, whether it's a pagan god or just something stupid or whatever, you're going to have problems in your life, in your family, in your community, in your state, and in your country. And that is exactly what is happening a lot around this, a lot in the United States. And I hope and pray that more people wake up to this. Because if there's one thing I know about my Heavenly Father, He is always forgiving and always loving, and He always gives people a second, third, fourth, fifth, so many chances to come back to Him. And I think America needs to go back to God and put Him first. Because putting all these agendas first is just ripping our country apart. And we're not as unified as we used to be. Like, I remember back in the 80s, because I'm an 80s baby, the 80s were awesome. We were a unified country. We were a unified nation. I mean, we had Democrats and Republicans here in Oklahoma, but it wasn't like this hatred. Then it's like Clinton got in office, stupidly, twice. And it's just like, we just kind of started going downhill since then. I mean, we've had a couple Republican presidents since then. But what people don't realize is that whenever you get a Democrat in office, it usually takes a decade or two to correct the stupid stuff that a Democrat does. And that's just how it is. Because sometimes Democrats do a lot of damage to our country, to our economy. I don't like that, but that's just what I've noticed, and I'm only 39. And I'm not even an attorney. So, I mean, to me, it's just common sense, just paying attention to what's going on in your community, in your state, and in your country. But anyway, another field office for these people, the ATF, is Louisville, Kentucky, Miami, Florida, Nashville, Tennessee, New Orleans, Louisiana, New York City, Newark, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Phoenix, Arizona, Salt Lake City, Utah, San Francisco, California. Okay, San Francisco, you've become a dirty cesspool because you've allowed the homeless to just take over everything. You have not addressed the homeless population. From what I understand, you've also become a sanctuary city for illegal immigrants, especially those that have committed crimes, whether violent or nonviolent. San Francisco, your name is San Francisco. It's Saint Francisco. So, Christian name, right? So you need to start acting Christian. I think San Francisco started going downhill when more and more homosexuals moved out there and kind of took it over. So look at what's happening in San Francisco. It's not predominantly heterosexual anymore. I feel sorry for people that live out there that are heterosexuals and are married and have kids, and it's just like, okay, you just have to be careful with what's being taught in your schools. You have to be taught you have to be careful what your kids are exposed to. What's interesting is that there was an interview I saw, was it 5 years ago or something? It wasn't recent, but there was this lady, she was being interviewed about how the homeless population just exploded out there in San Francisco. And, she's born and raised in San Francisco. I think she's like in her 40s or 50s or something. She said, I was born and raised here, and this city never looked like this. She just said, my city used to be beautiful, and now it's turning to garbage and trash. I mean, that just broke my heart for her. Because it's like, okay, you have a beautiful city, and it's just going to crap because of what the liberals and progressives and the Democrats are doing and what they want to do. Like, what's interesting is that Democrats and progressives and liberals, they make all these promises to help people with social reform and social, welfare programs, and they don't actually help. All it does is authorize your government to collect more money, but the money doesn't actually go towards what it's supposed to go to. And then when it does go towards what it's supposed to go to, the money is not spent wisely. Like, there's so much fraud and waste and mismanagement of money. So it's really quite sad, makes no sense. The next field office is Seattle, Washington. Then we have St. Paul, Minnesota, Tampa, Florida, and Washington, D.C. And they also have field offices in different countries such as Canada, Mexico, El Salvador, Colombia, Iraq, and in the Caribbean. So, moving on to the regulation of firearms, it says the ATF is responsible for regulating firearm commerce in the United States. The Bureau issues federal firearms licenses to sellers and conducts firearms licensee inspections. The Bureau is also involved in programs aimed at reducing gun violence in the United States by targeting and arresting violent offenders who unlawfully possess firearms. Well, we know that's a lie because they've been targeting civilians. They've been targeting just everyday people, not actually the people that are the problem. There's a section that talks about firearms tracing and firearms ballistic tracing, and they have like a way of following the breadcrumbs, so to speak. And I just wonder really how good they are at that, considering that they're targeting regular everyday Americans. And then there was, some of those operations that completely failed during Obama's time, his regime. Was it Fast and Furious? I think it was named after one of those movies or something. And then Too Hot to Handle or something. It was just dumb. It's like, wow, you definitely have a lot of frat guys in charge of that agency if they're calling their operations Fast and Furious, and some of these others that are ridiculous. In terms of regulation of explosives, this I found to be interesting. So it says, with the passage of the Organized Crime Control Act, also known as OCCA, in 1970, ATF took over the regulation of explosives in the United States, as well as prosecution of persons engaged in criminal acts involving explosives. One of the most notable investigations successfully conducted by ATF agents was the tracing of the vehicle used in the World Trade Center 1993 bombings, which led to the arrest of persons involved in the conspiracy. So what's interesting is that the World Trade Center was attacked again, and they didn't really catch those people. So that's a problem. It says ATF also enforces provisions of the Safe Explosives Act, passed after 9/11 to restrict the use or possession of explosives without a federal license to use them. ATF is considered to be the leading federal agency in most bombings that occur within the United States. And that sentence doesn't really make sense. But basically, the ATF is the leading agency that looks into things like this, and they actually have recovery procedures after a bombing and things of that nature. So they're the ones that go in and investigate. I just wonder really how good they are with that, because 9/11 could have been prevented. There were so many things that fell through the cracks because of these federal agencies, different ones, whether it's the FBI or police or ATF or whatever the case may be, or even immigration. I mean, here's the thing, there were so many clues and there were so many warnings. And our military failed, the Pentagon failed, the federal government failed, several agencies failed. And, this is what happens when you have, the wrong people in charge of these federal agencies for a really long time. And it's just they care more about the status quo and they care more about preserving the bureaucracy as opposed to doing what's right. So 9/11 could have totally been prevented. 9/11 didn't just happen overnight. It took time to plan all that. and it took time to implement it. It was very well orchestrated, but even so, there were so many people that did not do their job to protect the United States. So our government completely failed the American people on that. Let me get a drink of water. Hold on just a moment. Okay, so moving on. Let's see here. In terms of their directors, they've had quite a few, and the majority of them have been acting directors because they can't always decide who to approve to be in charge, because there's kind of been a conflict of interest for a while, which is interesting in itself. But the first one was Rex D. Davis. He was the director of the ATF from 1970 to 1978. Next one was G.R. Dickerson. He was in office, not in office, but the director. Excuse me, now I got the hiccups. He was the director from 1979 to 1982. Then we have Stephen Higgins. He was the director from 1982 to 1993. Then you have John McGow. I'm not really sure how to pronounce his name, but he was the director from 1993 to 1999. Then you have Bradley Buckles. He was the director from 1999 to 2004. Then you have Edgar A. I think it's Domenech. Let's see here. He was the acting director in 2004. Then you have Carl Truscott. I think that's how you pronounce his name. He was the director from 2004 until 2006. Then we have Edgar A. Domenech, however you pronounce his last name. He's the second time acting director. He was the acting director in 2006. Then we have Michael Sullivan. He was the acting director from 2006 until 2009. Then you have, and by the way, no relation there, not that I'm aware of. Then we have Ronnie A. Carter. He was the acting director in 2009. Then you have Kenneth E. Melson. He was the acting director from 2009 until 2011. Then you have, let's see here, you have B. Todd Jones. He was the acting director, or I say he, could have been a she. It just tells me B. Todd Jones. They were the acting director from 2011 until 2013, and then I guess they were the actual director from 2013 until 2015. Then you have, let's see here, you have Thomas Brandon. He was the ATF deputy director and the acting director from 2015 to 2019. Then you have Regina Lombardo. She was the ATF deputy director and then acting director from 2019 until 2021. Then we have the current director, which is Marvin Richardson, and he is the ATF deputy director and the acting director. So this is one of those things that you have to be careful who you put in charge. And, you know, do they really have the integrity, the morals, and the values to be in charge of something as important as the ATF? Because, you know, the ATF, again, had its beginnings going back to the IRS, the Department of the Treasury, which I think is stupid. I think that's where a lot of its corruption comes from. That's probably where they get the nerve to ask for, what was it, $1.4 billion? Yeah, $1.4 billion a year almost. Very ridiculous there. That's just sucking us dry of our tax dollars, unfortunately. So this is a very interesting agency. We do need them. It's just I don't think we need as many employees in it, and I don't think they should be spending $1.4 billion. I think that's ridiculous, and that is a mistake. And I think they need to do a better job of protecting the United States and not targeting ordinary citizens. I think they need to actually go after bad people and follow the breadcrumbs. You know, follow where things lead you. But it's not going to be at a gun show. You know, it's not going to be where legal citizens and where legal gun purchases take place. Need to go where illegal and unlawful gun purchases take place. Because I've been to a couple gun shows in my life. I haven't been to one probably since my 20s. And when I was there, I was just looking around. I think it's like a combination, like gun and boat show or something. And so I was looking around, and, you know, I didn't see anybody there at this gun show that I thought was shady, weird, didn't belong there. And this was in Oklahoma. Okay, so if anybody is going to buy a gun, it's going to be people that live in Oklahoma, Kansas, Texas, you know. Yeah, so, you know, we Oklahomans, we can spot shady, shifty people pretty quick. And, you know, at this gun show, I didn't really see anyone that looked odd. Everything looked legit. The gun shop owners were super nice. They were not against women buying guns. In fact, they were for them, because they want to make sure that women are protected. And these gun shop owners are not just there to make a bunch of money off of women buyers. It's not like a car salesman, not by any means, because these gun shop owners, at least the ones I met, they are not going to sell you something that you cannot handle or that is not appropriate for you or your life or your lifestyle. Like, they actually take into consideration, you know, what can you handle or what can you not handle, you know, that kind of thing. So I appreciate that, and that tells me they have honesty and integrity. So for the ATF to be targeting, you know, ordinary citizens and to be bothering gun shop owners and things like that, it's like, you know, gun shop owners, they go through so much anyway, like with regulations and licensing and requirements. I mean, it's, you know, buying and selling guns is not as easy as it used to be. You know, what's interesting is that the more the government cracks down on stuff in regards to guns and weapons and things of that nature, they just aim it at the public, at law-abiding citizens. Like, they're not really going after people that are breaking the law. So that's really, it's dumb. It makes me laugh, because I'm like, what else is new with our government? You know, the easier target is the people that are actually obeying the law, and then they set them up for failure. They entrap them. And that's what happened with that Weaver guy. And unfortunately, his son and his wife were murdered. So, yeah, so that's why we have to be careful about these agencies, who's in charge of them. And we do need to be aware, the American people, as well as the House, the Senate, they need to be aware of what is going on in these agencies, especially when they are spending billions of dollars a year. You know, it's not just a couple thousand, it's billions, and this is per year. So that is a serious issue with that, because I think that is excessive. Because all they're really doing is they're policing people that actually obey the law. Yeah, they're not going after the bad people. I find that funny, because I'm just like, you know, it's like, how do I describe this? Well, to me, and I'll close with this, to me, the stupidity of the ATF is like them having a gun raid, or raiding a country club. You know, just regular everyday Americans, that are playing golf and tennis. Just making their life a living hell. Like, you know, unlawful activities are typically not at country club type places. It's just not, you know, like, you're targeting the middle class and the upper middle class, and you're targeting rich people. And you're claiming that they're the drug dealers and the gun smugglers? I don't think so. It just makes me laugh. I'm just like, oh my gosh. Like, thugs don't go to country clubs because they would stand out. You know what I mean? Like, they would look odd. So, but anyway, I just find that funny, because, you know, one of the controversies in regards to the ATF is that, you know, prior to some more legislation being passed that kind of helped the ATF get or have some type of alignment and some type of ethics, the ATF was going after people's collectors. They're going after their antiques. Yeah, they were going after these citizens' private possessions. They weren't actually going after unlawful or illegal possessions. They were going after the expensive goods. So it's like, wow. That's like the IRS going after someone that actually owns a nice car and saying, oh, we just want your nice car. You don't deserve to have that. I mean, and you'd be surprised how many IRS investigations are started by IRS agents that have problems with greed. And, you know, there's this really good show I've talked about before. It's called American Greed. It's one of my favorite shows. I love it. And it catches It talks about people that commit white collar crimes. Every once in a while there's a murder or something, but it's mostly white collar crimes. And what's interesting is how many foreigners come to America and they have these Ponzi schemes, and then they get on the show American Greed. I'm like, that's not American Greed if they're from Russia. That's Russian greed. But anyway, there's this one episode, I've never forgotten this. There's this one guy, he had a Ponzi scheme, whatever going on, a rich white guy or whatever. And he was driving like a really nice, I'll just make this up, like a Ferrari, like some kind of fancy sports car, and a IRS agent was driving to or from work or something and was behind this Ferrari and at a traffic light, and the IRS agent was like, do they really deserve that car? So they were eyeballing this guy. They saw he was kind of cocky, whatever, and they didn't think he deserved to drive that car, and so this IRS agent wrote down the license plate of this Ferrari, of this guy that owned it, and he looked it up and he started investigating this guy. Like, he started an investigation without any evidence. It's like, wow, targeting someone. It's just that this IRS agent actually happened to hit the jackpot because this guy actually was a bad businessman and doing unethical, illegal things. And I was like, whoa, but what does that tell you about the IRS? Like, here they are running people's plates based on, you don't deserve that car. I don't think you deserve to live there. So they're running people's plates, they're running people's addresses, and if they have their SSN number, like their social security number, then they're running that too. Like, they're not actually conducting investigations based on evidence, so they're targeting people. And every once in a while they hit a jackpot, and unfortunately, I can't stand this, whenever they hit a jackpot, they actually find someone that actually did break the law and was breaking the law, then they use that as an excuse. Oh, we should do even more policing because what we did was right. Actually, it was not. I mean, kudos to you, Mr. IRS agent or whatever, for catching that guy, but, you know, the beginnings of that investigation were not ethical. And then it gets worse, folks. You know, let me get a drink of water. Hold on just a second. So get this. So this IRS agent saw that this guy is cocky, drives a nice car. He goes, basically he wants to entrap him. So what this IRS agent does is he recruits a female IRS agent that's like hot or whatever, like extremely good looking. And she somehow manages to go on a date with this guy that owns the Ferrari, and he starts bragging to her, but he doesn't know that she's an IRS agent or whatever. And he starts bragging to her about his possessions, all this stuff. You're being the cocky guy. That's what cocky men do, even if they're not unlawful citizens or whatever. Well, he didn't know that she was basically a law enforcement type of individual with IRS or maybe the FBI. I think she was IRS. And based off of what he said, they were able to investigate him even more. And eventually he got arrested and went to jail. And I kind of felt sorry for him because I was like, you know what? If you hadn't been driving your fancy car through that intersection with the IRS behind you, and if you hadn't gone out with that hot chick who really was never interested in you to begin with, and if you had not opened your big fat mouth and bragged about your possessions and your business, this guy probably would have never been caught, like he would have never gone to jail. I just find that funny. But I just think it's hilarious because, the IRS, this is a perfect example why the IRS was used initially and throughout time for the legalization and the taxation and the law enforcement arm of the alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and explosives sales and crimes and things like that. Because the IRS, they have no problems in trapping anyone, and they will totally set you up. They made this guy think, oh my goodness, that he was on a hot date with this woman. And here she is. She can arrest him and has handcuffs, but not for the bedroom. It's to take him to jail. I just busted out laughing at that episode because it was just so funny. I just felt sorry for the guy. I was like, oh man, that poor crook. I mean, yes, he should go to jail. I think he's probably out of jail by now because that was several years ago, this episode or whatever. But, I just thought it was funny. I just thought it was so funny. But, here's the thing. If you're listening to this podcast, be careful about the cars that you drive. And then, let me say this to the men folk that are listening in to my podcast. Love you very much. Let me just tell you that if a woman hits on you and she looks like, she's out of your league, she probably is, and you should be suspicious of her. Like, I'm not saying you can't go out with her or anything, or that you shouldn't go out with her, but, you need to do a background check on her and make sure she's not like the FBI or something. And also, make sure she's not with ATF, because ATF, like, for example, with that Weaver guy, they totally lied about him. They made up basically a police record and then passed it around from agency to agency, just to solidify it and make it legit, and it wasn't legit. And then his son and his wife got killed. So, you need to be careful about dating law enforcement, because I've dated a couple of law enforcement guys. Oh man, I'm so glad we didn't date hardly any at all. And, I'm so glad I didn't marry a law enforcement person. It's just they see crime everywhere, and that's stupid. And it's like they're always on the hunt, and I can't stand that. And they bother people. They target people. I'm like, that's not right. It's just not. It's no bueno, as they say. It's no bueno. But anyway, do check out American Greed. It's an awesome show. I love it. I love that stuff. Oh, I did want to mention this. We did launch a new podcast as well called The After Show. And the reason why we launched that podcast, and we are creating a YouTube channel for it, we've had some problems with uploading a video. I think it's, or my first episode, which is technically a video as well. We've had some problems uploading the first video because I think it's our internet connection. Whenever the winds pick up here in Oklahoma, sometimes we have down power lines and things of that nature. And so it's taking like hours to upload a video. And it normally takes like 10-15 minutes. So I know there's something going on with that. But we did launch a new podcast that you can hear just like this one. It's called The After Show. And the reason why we created that podcast was because we noticed that there's only so many things that we can fit into one episode with the endurance of labor laws. And sometimes the things we discuss and things that come up within this podcast, we need to be not concerned, but there are certain topics that they need to stay in their place. So sometimes things come up in our podcast. I was like, okay, that's not really relevant completely to the show, or maybe it's not relevant to the genre. So we kind of wanted to have another show that talks about the things that do come up in this show, but it's not the exact same format. So we kind of wanted to have a little bit more freedom, because this show, nothing against this show, it's great, we love it, we founded it, started it and all that stuff, and I created it, and I'm the host, all that good stuff, but, this show is very targeted in terms of what we talk about, right? So, like, for example, this podcast, we talk about labor unions, trade unions, we talk about different federal agencies, rules, laws, regulations, like, that's very specific, right? But sometimes, funny things come up in the podcast, and so we thought, well, we'll move some of those things over to the after show, so that way these episodes of the endurance of labor laws are not like 2 or 3 or 4 hours long, because we do try and keep these short, but it's hard to do that sometimes because of the material that we cover. And I say this with gentleness on this, because here's the thing. We do try and keep our podcast episodes to 20 or 30 minutes, but they are hardly ever 20 or 30 minutes, because there's so much information to go over with these topics. And so I just felt that it would be wrong to cherry pick just certain things and only talk about that when discussing like a large federal agency like this, and not really go into details. Because I think that if you're going to discuss something, you need to discuss all of it, at least as much of it as you can, and you need to present the facts. And you need to just say it like it is. So being that this show is very pinpoint, it's very precise, we wanted to discuss kind of more free-range material, so to speak, on our other show, which is called The After Show. I kind of look at it as like, the late night show, or maybe the daily show, like something that, Jon Stewart used to do. So it's not always so precise, but it's more like a more easygoing news broadcast show. So do check that out. And we are working on our YouTube channel with getting that one launched. It's just going through approval and, having internet issues with that. But do check out the podcast itself because we are doing video and audio. So the audio will always be available to you first before we do the video because uploading videos are just a bit tedious or just a little more tedious. It's not, I don't mean that negatively, but it just takes a few more steps and sometimes it takes longer because those files tend to be larger with video. It's like when you're listening to a song on the radio as opposed to watching a movie, right? Like there's more data involved with a video as opposed to audio. But do check us out on that. Oh, and we do have an email address for the after show as well. It is the aftershow2023@gmail.com. And then also if you want to contact us for the endurance of labor laws, it is yourlaborlaws@gmail.com. So do check us out or email us with that if you have any questions or concerns or comments. Also, do check out our YouTube video, The Endurance of Labor Laws, and, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and comment. Let us know what you like, what you don't like, those kinds of things, because we do love to hear from you. Every once in a while, someone drops me a weird line, and it's usually someone that's Marxist, and they don't agree with what we're saying. And I'm like, well, you need to look to your, what you have been indoctrinated in, basically. Like, if you think communism is great, then move to China because it's not that great, but that's where communism is. If you think Marxism is great, there are plenty of, not so good countries right now on the face of this earth that are very much behaving in a Marxist manner. And, if you want to be broke and have a tyrannical government, then be Marxist. But if you do not want to be broke and if you do not want a tyrannical government, then do not be Marxist. You need to be capitalist and you need to be Republican. Because unfortunately, the Democratic Party, they used to be normal. I don't think they're normal anymore. I feel sorry for Democrats because, Democrats didn't used to be so illogical, bizarre, weird, tyrannical. But whenever their party basically got taken over by liberals and progressives, that's when I kind of feel like, just your normal everyday Democrats, it's like they don't have a party anymore. They've kind of been shooed to the side by these very aggressive nutbags. And so, let me say this to my Democrat listeners. If you're frustrated with your party, I understand, but come over to the Republican Party because there are more and more Democrats that are sick and tired of the crap, the not so good stuff that's going on in our country and within the Democratic Party, and so they're coming over to the Republican Party and they're realizing it's not that bad. Like, we actually do believe in you. Like, we're really not so different. In fact, we have more in common than uncommon, so to speak. So just FYI, be aware of that. But I will go ahead and end this podcast. But as usual, until next time, I pray that you're happy, healthy, and whole, that you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Thank you so much. God bless and bye-bye.